Welcome, my dear audience and friends, to the monthly episode of Cancer Convos with Grace B. This is your host, Grace B, coming to you from New York City, the city that never sleeps and is home to Cancer Convos with Grace B. I'd like to thank you guys all so much for being, loyal viewers and listeners to our show. And thankfully, it shows that we're doing something good. I have a fantastic guest, and the reason why he is here with us is because he has had an experience as a living kidney recipient, and touch wood, he is still alive with us today. I'm bringing this subject up because here in New York State, last year, Governor Kathy Hochul passed legislation into law allowing living organ donors to be reimbursed for kidney and liver donations. And so, without spilling too much of the beans, I will be introducing my amazing guest, Charles Rice, who is doing wonderful work in the kidney transplant arena. Welcome, Charles, and I'm so great to have you with me today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for the invite. I know this is going to be a great conversation we're going to have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So, I'd like to first ask um, your brief background, your experience.
Okay, well, I'm going on 16 years for my kidney transplant.
Mm-hmm.
I got my kidney transplant in 2007. Prior to that, I crashed into dialysis in 2003. And then prior to that, my first biopsy was in 93, which it took a lot of time before I got a chance to get into the having the kidney failure by that time, by 2003. So it took a long time. And the thing about it, when we had the GFR situation with the people of color with a different number, some of us wasn't able to get on dialysis right now, or even get into the list for get a transplant. So it took a while before we got a chance to get there. So some of us needed to be alive to make that point, and some of us wasn't able to make it by that time.
Absolutely.
All in all, I do motivational speaking for dialysis and transplant patients. I try to encourage them to help them with their medication regimen, medication therapy management, things about that sort to help the patient get over their burdens of being sick. You know, sometimes people have burdens of being sick and they think there's nothing for them to do, like stay in a chair or just be sick.
Wonderful. So, what was your experience as a kidney transplant recipient? What was it? How, what was the process like?
What a process for being a transplant recipient. It took me almost 4.5 years on dialysis before I got a chance to get a transplant. You know, when I got the transplant, I got called two times. One was December, one was November 2007, and then I kind of waited all day long for the answer to call back, and went to dialysis and everything. Didn't eat anything, so I said, "Well, I have to wait and see." And then, of course, overnight came by, and then nothing happened. And then I'm like, "Oh well, I guess it's not for me this time." And then finally, I got a call in December, and which was for me. And that experience was great because I was overjoyed because I was like, I'm calling everybody on the phone myself, like, hey, I'm going to give a transplant. And everybody's like, are you sure? I said, yes, I'm sure. You know, then I took too long before I got there, and they kept calling me. So, are you on your way? I was just overwhelmed, you know, just kind of happy and full of joy, you know. And I said, yes, I'm on my way. And I finally got there to the hospital, and at that time, they wanted me to strip down and get these meds in me because you only have so much time before they can put the kidney into you. So you can have like 72 hours for the kidney to get into you, but you have to have the medication in you within 24 hours. So that way you can get your immune suppressant down. And then when you have that down, you can get your transplant. And then, of course, by the next morning, you're like, okay, let's get this going, you know. So finally had it going, and uh, transplant went very well. Had some issues with the waking up. Took like 6 weeks before I even woke up from just going to the bathroom.
Are
I
you
continued.
serious? Six
Yeah,
weeks? Oh my
weeks. Yeah,
goodness.
6 weeks. It took me that much time going to dialysis again, and then when I finally woke up, I started rejecting it. My body was rejecting the kidney. My whole rejection process was like a whole year, the whole year of 2008. Started off with 45 pills a day, trying to make sure I can keep this kidney working. Went through a plasmapheresis, went through a solamedrol treatment, which is 1,500 milligrams of steroids. I was looking pretty swollen by that time, because the steroids can make some issues with your body, and
The
it cause you
steroids, right?
steroids. Yes, solamedrol treatment we had. So I had to take that every week, and every week I had to have a biopsy to stay overnight at the hospital, and then finally had that Procret treatment. Also, Procret is a medication you take to help fight those things, fight the rejection. Had 8 treatments of that. Um, by the time I had my last treatment, I had all the symptoms. I had hot flashes. I had rashes. I had to have a fan on. Had my feet in ice, and all those different signs of rejection from the medication and from the kidney. So all that time, when a whole year and a half, a whole year went through that, and finally in 2009, everything subsided and worked fine. But however, the treatment of the steroids caused my kidneys to make not my kidneys, but actually caused the medication from the steroids to
Hmm.
deaden my hips. Your capillaries of your hips there, so the sockets were not receiving enough blood. So I had to have some hip replacements done too, one in March and one in May of 2009.
Hip replacements, all that, and this, oh my goodness.
Both hips were replaced at that time, and at least I'm glad it wasn't one at both at the same time. It was actually
Yeah.
a month separated from each time, but it was a struggle at the beginning, and a lot of us hope that when we get the transplant, we can just start moving right away and start living our life the best life we can.
Hmm.
But sometimes there's complications that you have to make sure that everything is copacetic, everything's right, your medication is proper, you're taking it at the right time and every day, and you make sure you don't fall from that schedule. So when you do fall from that schedule, sometimes you got to make sure you do take your medication anyway,
Hmm.
just in case you might have forgotten. But it was a struggle at the beginning.
I can imagine. Something I forgot to ask at the beginning. Were
Okay.
you already on a list for the transplant?
Yes, I was on the list. Yes, yes.
For how long were you on
I
the
was on the list for maybe about 3.5 years, because the first time you get on
three
the
and a
dialysis,
half years?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of times when you first get on dialysis, you're not on the list right now. You got to actually prove yourself, and so many kind of
Hmm.
understanding that when you prove yourself, you're compliant. Compliant to going to dialysis, not missing the time, taking your meds. Make sure you take your phosphorus binders. Your labs are great. Then they can have the ruling of making sure they allow you to get on the list. But the thing
Okay.
about that, everybody should be able to be on the list with no problem, because everybody needs that organ, or sometimes multiple organs, you know.
Hmm.
But I guess sometimes there's complications, and sometimes there's other diseases persons that may have, and they can't get on the list right away. And sometimes it's the age perspective. Um, Sometimes, like at beginning, with like a color issue, you know the color issue. Some people of my color was not able to get on the list right away due to the GFR rating.
Okay. So that was some kind of inequity involved. If people of color were not, should we say, kind of encouraged or allowed, what would you say about that?
I think both of those was not encouraged enough, or not able to be chosen for that.
Okay,
And it's a
chosen.
lot of
Okay.
times, and a lot of times they just may talk to you about different types of dialysis, but they won't talk to you about transplant, or
Hmm.
getting on the list. And then a lot of times they want us, people of color, to go get a transplant from somebody else right away, if
Hmm.
we can allow that, get a live donor. Uh,
So in other words, enough information, health
yes,
literacy for them
yes.
to know what it's all about. Because when you were talking about being compliant before you're put on the list,
Hmm.
I'm sure many people don't realize that these are things that have to be, that keeps them being held accountable to be able to go on the list. What do you think?
Yes, that is true. That is true. Because I've seen many patients come in to dialysis units, and they're not compliant enough, but they still think they should be on the list. You know,
Mm-hmm.
this is actually a gift of life. You know, this is not a
It's not like an examination or
right,
something. You're trying to
right,
keep people stay,
right.
make people stay alive.
They're
Hmm.
alive, yeah, and that's the key thing to keep people alive. You know, I know sometimes the machines keep us alive longer than we expect to. There's people who've been on dialysis longer than 25 years. You know,
Hmm.
and sometimes they may have other health issues, and they may be just compliant or enough to just stay on dialysis, and they just might want to just do that and be happy with it. But myself, I mean, I was when I first started, I was like 35 years old, so I'm like, hold it, I gotta get out of this chair. I got things to do in my life, you know. But
Yeah.
that health inequities and things like that, there was not good at that time, you know. And now that the voice is being heard a lot more from the patients and other people of color, uh, even the health system is starting to recognize a lot more too, because they don't realize that patients are not coming through of color, you know, black or brown, yellow. I mean, all these people that are still waiting for transplants, waiting for kidneys, you know, and they're not getting pushed forward. You know, they're not getting the education for it. You know? Although sometimes you get a lot of pamphlets when you go on dialysis, but who's going to read all that kind of stuff?
Who is going to read all that stuff? You know, the pamphlets, you're just paying printers, but it's not, the information is not sinking in
That's
for,
right. Yeah.
yeah.
Not sinking in, you know, because one time when you're on dialysis, your mind is not thinking properly, you know, because you got a brain fog going on when you have kidney disease and you're going through a machine every day. You don't even want to be on a machine every other day. You got 4.5 hours. You're gonna sit on a machine, and people are like, I'm just gonna sit in the chair. You know,
Hmm.
I've talked to many patients like that at different units that I went to that that's all they want to do is just sit in the chair.
Hmm.
And then if you just sit in a chair, you become more of a vegetable because you know you're just being just a statistic, that is,
Yes.
you know, and you're not trying to push yourself, you know.
Hmm.
Myself, when I got in the chair, I wanted to learn the machine. You know,
Hmm.
I wanted to learn for what this machine does. I wanted to learn what the medications would do. So I went to school for pharmacy while on dialysis, you know. So I said, well, I got to learn something. I got to be able to help somebody else that's coming behind me because I didn't have anybody to help me, you know. They pushed me forward to try to go to school. They helped me out with that. A lot of the PCT technicians, you know, the person that puts you on machines,
Yes.
they always fight over who's going to get me when they get back because I used to always bring them lunch. You know, if I'm at school, I'm going to be running a little late, so then they got to make sure they got my chair still warmed up, or you know, my setup together. So it was encouraging that to see them when I came in from when I came in from school, they was very happy and waiting for me. Chair's ready. So and that was the good thing about it. It was encouraging me at that time. My unit was really good, and I was also encouraging because they put a smile on everybody's face when I got there. You know, because I never missed a treatment, never got off early. You know, I just wanted to stay as compliant as I can. You know, a lot of
Yeah.
times when we say compliant, when a patient wants to be, when they look compliant, is not going to be for everybody.
Hmm.
Compliant for a person to be compliant is that they're going to do the best they can, the best with the knowledge they have, with the education they have. You know, I mean, that's the best thing they're going to be doing if they can or not. You know, it's not always going to be a book, but as long as they come and don't miss, that's compliant enough for me.
Absolutely. And being compliant as well has a lot to do with your support system.
Yes,
There's so many people that I met that were in those chairs all alone by themselves. They had no family near them, you know.
yes, yes.
So these are challenges that many of us have to go through
Hmm.
when we're living alone and we don't have family, you understand? That
Yes.
also adds to the compliance issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So
becomes. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go
Again,
ahead. Sorry.
when you have a support system, that gives you more encouragement. Also, you know, and when you
Yes.
sit in the chair by yourself, there's no family. You have no encouragement to keep on. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, I have a lot of patients I've talked to or spoken to that is that passed away that didn't have any family. I might have been the person they've been talking to, like a peer mentor, and maybe they had some other people, but that closeness of family, you know, sometimes that is not there for patients,
It's not
and they just
there.
didn't want to do it. You know, and even like I have a friend that just died recently. She just died last week
Oh
on Wednesday
dear.
last week, and she talked about her transplant, getting the transplant and everything, and she ended up having bone cancer. So she had chemo and tried to have dialysis. She says, "I'm not doing all that," you know. So the chemo kind of messed her up a little, make the kidney worse for her, and she was not going any more treatments. And she just said, "Well, I'm going to give up." You know, it's like, wow. I mean, her family was kind of close for her, and she was I think she might have been like 65 maybe right now at that time. So, and she just kind of said, well, there's no use to keep on holding this back, holding this on, So she decided to just let herself go.
Mm-hmm.
She passed away last week, but it was a sad day. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry to hear that. So, what was your reaction actually when you had to go through this, when you had all these complications? How were you able to find inspiration and positivity? Because it's quite overwhelming, this.
Yes, it is. It is very quite overwhelming because sometimes you when you're in that stage of depression that is sometimes you're more like woe is me. Why did this happen to me? How come I am the one?
Mhm.
Then sometimes we gotta say, why not you? Sometimes when we say why not you, because sometimes you have to educate somebody from this. Um, when I went through it, I was like, well, I always had a good spirit about myself. My grandmother prayed for me several times every day when I used to have epilepsy. Okay, that goes back from faith. Okay, when you have like a huge standing background of faith that's helping you up, you got a cornerstone with you, and you trying to tackle things as it goes, because you say, okay, well, God has me, you know, and that's what I always say, like, well, okay, I'm here for a reason. I got to do something for somebody else. I got to make sure this snowball effect affects everybody else.
Mhm.
I can share my ministerial understanding. I can share my wisdom of transplants. I can share my wisdom of getting over the hard parts of life. Uh, I know that I had some moments that I would come home from dialysis and just cry because, like, why? And then you get to stages in your life when it happens like that. And even if you're not going through a transplant or going through a sickness, there's moments in our life that we have to sit down in a corner and just ask ourselves, what can we do better for ourselves? What can we do best for our family? What can we do best so that you are a loyal servant, that you are a follower of Christ, something like that. So you may like, okay, well, I got to get myself together, got to pick myself by my bootstraps,
Mhm.
big pants on, and with a tight belt, and just stand forward. And I had to encourage myself many times each day that when I went to dialysis and ride on that Metro Mobility bus, because I used to drive all the time, and then next thing I know, I got to ride this bus. You know,
Yeah.
then the first time riding that bus we're in a storm here in Minnesota. And so I was on a bus for like 2 hours, and I'm like, dude, it was discouraging also, discouraging like that fact
Mhm.
because now I'm going to be 2 hours late. Now I'm going to get off 2 hours later. So that was a struggle for me at that time too. So you have these times in your life that you just can't overcome, but God only puts so much on you that you can handle.
As they say, God only gives you what you can handle, no more,
Right,
no less.
right, right. And sometimes we all think that, what are you doing to me, Lord? What are you saying? Okay, well, I'm saying that you're stronger than what you think you are, and you can overcome these battles. This too shall pass.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Those are great words of wisdom. In my intro, as you heard, I mentioned about we had been discussing this in the past, and I mentioned that here in New York State, the governor passed legislation into law for living donors to get reimbursed on whatever on their costs and all that. Um, I know that you're very passionate about this and is one of the things you're working hard for in your state. Do you see your state following suit in the near future since New York has kind of opened this up?
Open the can of worms.
Hopefully not a can of worms.
Right.
Belling
Yes.
the cat, but
Yeah.
belling the cow, as they say.
Yes. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
Mhm.
I believe we probably would follow suit with that ourselves here in Minnesota because we
Yeah.
know when we started off with the Donor Protection Act, we were one of the states too that signed the bill last year.
In Minnesota?
And Minnesota, yes,
Yeah.
we're one of the states that passed the bill last year for the donor protection of the help donors keep yourself compensated and not losing their job and not having to deal with issues with health insurance or life insurance, so
Mhm.
that way it was a big, good thing for us.
Mhm.
You know,
We watch movies when people
movies,
go
yes, yes,
into emergency and they come out without an organ. You understand? So everybody's like very, very skeptical about these things right now.
right, yeah, definitely. They're very skeptical, and that's one thing about it. We get fear. Fear comes across us, and we don't understand fear as much as we think we do. But fear it can overwhelm us, you know.
Yes,
And
it can.
yes, because I even like when I was needing the kidney at the beginning, I asked one of my relatives. She said, "You got $10,000?" And I'm like, "Are you serious? I'm your
Ten thousand
relative."
dollars for a kidney?
Yes, 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 yes,
Seriously? Good
yes.
Lord.
I think she was joking, but I'm like, that's kind of for real because she didn't smile. Like, but I understand. People want to take everything back with them when they leave. And everything is when you pass away, your car doesn't go with you.
Mm,
Okay, your money doesn't go with you. Uh, your spouse doesn't go with you. And a lot of times you just got to give up some things. The people that's behind has to take care of everything else.
mhm,
So you might as well sign your life away. Say this: I am going to be an organ donor. I'm going to do
mhm.
this. I'm going to do that so I can help somebody else along the way. You know,
Yes.
yeah. But I do think we will follow that bill to help everybody get paid or compensated for the time of being a transplant recipient or transplant donor, organ donor.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, it is necessary and it's a good step. And I pray that other states follow suit as well,
Yes, I definitely
because
understand. That too, yes.
because of them, many people still walk, organ
Yes.
donors.
Yeah.
There are many of the donors, they've passed, but their families have donated their organs to institutes and, other,
Yes.
recipients
Hmm.
who wait on lists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good because, a lot of people, like I said before, were afraid to be a donor. But if you get not really just say compensated for your time and everything, but that you may have more organ donors that come
Hmm.
forward,
Hmm.
and not have to wait till they pass away to give their organs away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
Mhm.
So, last but not least, because I've already taken so much of your time already, what's going on in your life right now? What is it that you're doing to push this, or to make your experience worthwhile?
Well, I'm part of a couple of different organizations that help build curriculums for pharmacists and nephrologists to help them understand kidney disease and help to understand the patient's voice. And the patient's voice is very impossible to not listen to because they're powerful when they understand what's going on. When you can be your own advocate and understand about the bills, about the medication, about how you're being treated in the system, your voice is very powerful, and you can come and talk to your doctors, your care team, and they would reach out to you and understand what you're saying and say, well, okay, you have a option or you have an opinion. Yes, I have an opinion. And sometimes patients didn't do that. Patients were afraid to do that. They're afraid to talk to the doctor because they think the doctor knows everything. They won't know everything unless you tell me your symptoms.
Hmm.
Tell them the symptoms, and then they can go back and look. If I've had that myself, that when I was going to a clinic before, and she said, "Well, I don't know. I'll come right back," but I know she's going to read. But sometimes I used to play the trick because when I was out going to school for pharmacy, so I'm like, well, let me see if they know this. You know, not just to make them stumble, but to make sure they're in the P's and Q's when they come to a transplant recipient or person that's on dialysis, somebody has a kidney disease. And they may come back and say, "Yes, I got it, I understand." But now you understand me that when you come in the door, you gotta understand what's gonna happen next, or understand the symptoms. You gotta understand the questions I may have to ask you. You know,
Yes.
because even like I did a lot of my internships at different hospitals, and they say, "Oh, here comes Charles." And they're like, "Okay, well, Charles is here, so he's got to be asking some questions, or he's gonna say, did you wash your hands? Did you do this?" and everything like that. And that's one thing about it, when you in the medical field, you know, even for going into emergency or even just going to a clinic, you kind of watch for little things. You kind of watch for mishaps uh, or things that they're not doing properly. But you want to make sure you want to give them kudos for the stuff they do.
Yes.
You can't always
Yeah.
look for the negative, but you got to look for the positive because you need help. You know,
Yeah.
and then if you come in with some knowledge, they understand it and they're happy to hear it. But sometimes some people are not. You
Yeah.
know, because even like when I had my first medication list, I had it had like 4 blood pressure pills, and I would go to my clinic or to my nephrologist and stuff. And I said, well, I don't need 3 of these. There's 3 you can take me off. Then it may be, we'll see. It'll be 2 weeks later they took me off of 2. So they knew that, well, okay, well, he's compliant enough, he's understanding the medication, and he's taking it on time, and his blood pressures are lower, and he's yeah, okay, yeah. So we can take him off this medication. And that was a good thing, because once you have some wisdom, some understanding, some knowledge of medical, you can get over a lot of things, and you can
Yeah.
get a lot more.
And you have been in both situations,
Yes.
as a patient and also as a health professional. So, you know, putting those two together actually is it's really great.
Hmm. Yeah.
So for the person that is watching right now who is let's say maybe waiting to be taken off the list, or about to or considering, becoming a donor, what words of wisdom or advice would you give to them
Okay.
for the
Uh,
recipient to be, first of all?
recipient to be first. Be your own advocate. Do the best you can to stay compliant for you,
Mhm.
so that when you have to go through the transplant, understand it, transfer as the transplant, you can be compliant. You can be the best you can, the best patient that you're knowledge of to have. Always read something, some kind of materials, so that way when you go to the doctor's office, you have some understanding of what's going to happen. You understand that transplants are not a cure-all. You got to understand that there are going to be some times that you're not going to be feeling well. There's sometimes you may take 45 pills a day, and then you get titrated down to like 12 pills a day. You got to know that uh, it's not as that you think it's going to be. It's going to be something different, but I want you to encourage you that you would be flying with flying colors if you learn things before you go and before you get the transplant. You know, like myself when I got the transplant, and then when I had the kidney disease, the cancer, and I was like, wow, I got to read on this first. You have bilateral nephrectomy, you got to understand they're going to take both sides of your kidneys out for kidney cancer, and they're going to remove 2 flex bones on both one of those sides, so that you won't be surprised when things happen. That's why you got to understand the pathology of some things and the understanding of the medical understanding, the concept of what goes into the whole time of being a transplant recipient, the whole time of being a kidney patient or an actual extra patient. You got to read up on everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's the understanding, because everything's gonna fall like what you think it's gonna say, book wise. As far as a donor coming along, encourage somebody. Say that sometimes you got to go out there and just like, well, today I'm gonna make a difference in somebody's life. I'm gonna be an organ donor, and I'm not gonna wait till I pass away to give my organs away. I'm gonna wait till we do something now. You know,
Mm-hmm.
give somebody a piece of your liver, and they can live on. You can give somebody a kidney and live on. You know, you just give somebody your what is it called? I lose thought right now. And sometimes we just got to make sure we just be a blessing to somebody. You know, being a blessing to somebody that you can see their life before them going better than they thought it was going to be before. You know,
Mm-hmm. Give them hope and another chance at life.
give them hope. Yes, give them hope, another chance of life. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Charles. This was wonderful talking to you. And before you go, what is one fun thing about you? Just one word.
Wild,
Wild.
wild and crazy.
That's a good one. That's the first word I've heard ever since. For the last 5 years, I've been doing this wild. Uh-oh, this is a first
Wow.
timer. Okay,
Yes,
Charles. Now we got that on record.
yes,
Wild.
wild.
Thank you so much, Charles. It was so wonderful, speaking with you. And
Thank
before I
you.
sign you out, let me, speak to the audience. So,
Mhm.
my dear audience and friends, there you have it. You've been listening to our wild Charles Rice.
Uh-huh.
He must be wild because he's been through a lot. Who has graciously, explained matters, of the greatest importance as regards being a kidney transplant recipient and what you need to know about it if you're considering getting one, and also as an organ donor, what you need to know. So, if you're considering being an organ donor, please don't hesitate because this is an opportunity to be able to save a life. So, without much ado, let me wind down and say thank you so much for being with us. And until the next episode, this is Grace B signing out. Ciao, ciao. God bless. Bye bye.